Solving an equation, we can do this. So we have an equation. How do we know? They tell us, and we see an equal sign. Great. We have two fractions, algebraic fractions. So what I mean by that is it's not just 3/2 plus 5/4, right? We have some x terms, in this case, in the denominator. So to tackle this one, we want to simplify the left-hand side to a single denominator, and a single fraction rather, and then multiply it out to get everything in the numerator and then solve a quadratic. So our first step with this one will be cross multiplying. That's where we can combine two fractions with different denominators. So for example, just with numbers, maybe let's make that 1, 2, 5, there we go. So just a side example, just adding two fractions, you would have learned how to cross multiply. So that's where the new denominator is 4 times 5, which is 20. Right, I'll just write it out in full, 4 times 5. The numerator is the first numerator, which is 3, times the second denominator, which is 5. And then we add the second numerator, which is 2, times the first denominator, which is 4. And then we can simplify that. Exactly the same idea, but this time with some x's floating around. So let's do that first. So our new denominator will be x plus 2 times x minus 4. Right, the product of the denominators. The new numerator will be 3 times x minus 4. And to that we will add 5 times x plus 2. And that is all equal to 2. Okay, so we have combined the left-hand side into a single fraction. What's next? So we can expand out the numerator and the denominator. So in the numerator we get 3 times x, which is 3x, 3 times -4, -12, plus 5 times x, 5x, plus 5 times 2, plus 10. That's all over. Now we can FOIL out the denominator. So that's x times x, and then x times -4, 2 times x, 2 times -4. Again, that all equals 2. We can group like terms to make it a bit simpler. So in the numerator, we have 3x plus 5x becomes 8x, minus 12 plus 10 becomes -2. In the denominator, x squared, no other like terms for that, but we can combine minus 4x plus 2x, that becomes minus 2x, and then minus 8 is also by itself, no other like terms, that's equal to 2. Awesome. So just to recap what we've done so far, we've combined the two fractions on the left-hand side into a single fraction, expanded it out, and then grouped like terms. From here, this is a good place to be. A single fraction on the left equals a number, or x, or something. Just a single fraction on the right, essentially, right? 2/1. What we can do now is multiply both sides by this denominator, which effectively brings this to be 2 times that. And then on the left-hand side, we're just left with 8x minus 2. So multiplying both sides by the denominator, we get 8x minus 2, because the denominator times, like, how do I say this? X squared minus, if we multiply both sides by the denominator, I'll just write it out in full. And then we times it by this term. The denominators will cancel out, and we're just left with 8x minus 2. on the left-hand side. But on the right-hand side, we of course have 2 times this denominator, like so. Alright, now our task is to get everything to one side of the equation and write it into a standard form of a quadratic to then solve for x. So we have some options here. We could expand out the 2 and then group everything, but I actually see that there's a factor of 2 on the left-hand side as well. So I'm just going to divide both sides by 2 to give us this equation. So all as I've done is realize, alright, there's a common factor on both sides of 2, so I'm just going to divide both sides by 2, makes our lives a bit easier. If you missed that, that's fine. You might see it come up later as well. Then I'm going to take everything to the right hand side, so I'll subtract 4x and I'll add 1. So subtracting 4x gives us, on the left hand side, just minus 1 remains. We're minusing 4x, so minus 2x minus 4x gives minus 6x. Then we'll add 1 to both sides, so minus 1 plus 1 is 0. X squared minus 6x, since we're adding 1, minus 8 plus 1 is minus 7. And when we get to here, give yourself a pat on the back, we're pretty much there. Right? All as we have now is a quadratic equation, which you know a billion different ways to solve. So home stretch. So in this case, let's factorize. 2 numbers that multiply to -7 and add to -6. So we're going to need our 2 x's, definitely a 7 and a 1, right? Because only factors of 7 are 1 and 7, because that's a prime number. But then what about the signs? So we want -6, so most of the value should be negative, so we'll put the negative in front of the 7, positive in front of the 1. We can check by expanding that out, and that looks correct. Finally, solving for x, we factorize, so now we just set both sets of brackets equal to 0. So the first one, x minus 7 equals 0, so x will equal 7, or x plus 1 equals 0, so x will equal minus 1. And those will be our 2 solutions. Recapping this one, we had a algebraic fraction in our equation. We combined the fractions into a single fraction and then expanded and simplified it a bit to get here. We then multiplied both sides by the denominator, and we did that to eliminate the fraction. We then boiled it down to a quadratic equation, which is really good for us, because then we just solved it.